continuing Queen Kunti's prayers, starting with text 81. We covered the first three. Some nice understandings. I think very simple summary is she was requesting that the material portion of her attachment to her sons and to her father's family be taken away, and that her attachment or affection go exclusively to the personality of Godhead that was rising, appreciating the affection that both sides of her family have for Krishna. And then she started describing some of the apparently contradictory features of Krishna and his relationship and his situation. And we'll cover much more of that as we go forward. This is a nice verse. Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. It's just names of Krishna. I remember very well during our days of Harinam and the city streets of New York, this is one of the songs that we sang regularly during Harinam. It's just names of Krishna. In the public, they didn't know what the heck was going on anyway. So we're hearing the Hare Krishna mantra, we're hearing Krishnaya Vasudevaya Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya. I don't know. But it worked. So let's hear and then repeat.
Daya Namo Namaha Vishaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Namo Namaha Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Vishaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa
Let me therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto the Lord. This is her nephew, who has become the son of Vasudeva, the pleasure of Devaki, the boy of Nanda and other cowherd men of Vrindavan, and the enlivener of the cows and the senses. So we're going to hear, this is Krishna having lunch, and Nanda Maharaj placing food items in his mouth in front of everybody because he was playing like, I'm a dependent little boy, I can't eat myself. Nice painting. Musical performance during lunch. Or maybe it's during dinner. I repeatedly offer my respects to Krishna, the son of Vasudeva, who gave joy to Devaki, who is the child of Nanda and satisfier of the senses of the gopis. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments, among all the avatars, you're the best. Though all who have prema are fortunate, my brother Vasudeva was most fortunate since you selected him as your father. That is the significance of the word Vasudeva, which could be Vasudeva, son of Vasudeva. And your mother, endowed with even more prema, is most fortunate. You made her more successful than all others by situating yourself in her womb alone. Thus, Kunti addresses Krishna as Devaki Nandana, he who gives joy to Devaki. Nanda, endowed with more prema, is most fortunate. You let him alone experience the sweetness of your infant or Kumara pastimes. Nandagopa Kumaraya. Yashoda with abundant prema is most fortunate. This will be explained in verse 31. So we're on 21. More. The pastimes of your Kaishora age have even more sweetness than the Kumara age. Thus, Kunti addresses Krishna as Govinda. Krishna got the name Govinda at the beginning of his Kaishora age, after he was bathed by the Surabhi cow. You take possession, or Vinda, of all the senses, of all people. So maybe you know this already, but here's a little painting. When Airavata, the elephant carrier of Indra, wanted to bathe Krishna, he was carrying celestial water in his trunk, and he gave Abhishek unto Krishna, and the place was called Airavata Kund. And on the right side of the painting is Surabhi, the wish-fulfilling cow, Kamadhenu, that also bathed Krishna in her milk. And when she, the Surabhi cow, gave bath to Krishna, Abhishek, then he received the name Govinda, at that time, in relation to the lifting of Govardhan Hill. And since that time, he's been known as Govinda. The enjoyers of this form of Krishna are not mentioned because of their extraordinary nature, the esoteric nature of this love, and the lack of qualification of others to taste it. That's Vishwanath. He's a Rasika Bhakta. Now comes text 22. We also sang this on the streets of New York City. And whenever people understood or didn't understand, we sang it anyways.
Nama Pankajanabhaya, Nama Pankajamaline, Nama Pankajanitraya, Namaste Pankajangre, Nama Pankajanabhaya, Pankajamaline, Nama Pankajanitraya, Nama Pankajanabhaya, Nama Pankajamaline, Nama Pankajanitraya, Namaste Pankajangre, Nama Pankajanabhaya, Nama Pankajamaline, Nama Pankajanitraya, Namaste Pankajangre.
My respectful obeisances are unto you, O Lord, whose abdomen is marked with a depression like a lotus flower, navel, pankaja, naba, naba means navel, so lotus navel, who are always decorated with garlands, maline, of lotus flowers, whose glance, netra, whose glance is as cool as a lotus, and whose feet are engraved with lotuses. Some of you may know the head pujari's brother is Pankajangri in Mayapur. Pankajangri. Jananivas is the head pujari, and his brother is taken from this verse. Pankajangri. In the Vokata, Pankajangraye, whose feet are engraved with lotus flowers. Another nice painting. It's the same painting. Panka means mud, and ja means generate. So the lotus is generated from the mud, so Panka ja. I had a godbrother also named Pankajanava. Nice devotee. Prabhupada's words. If we see a lotus flower, we can immediately remember Krishna. Just like if you love your child, if you see any garment, a small ship, shoes, or any playthings, immediately remember your child. Oh, this is my child's shoes. This is my child's playthings. This is his garment. So, it is the custom of love. It's certainly in poetic writings of many kinds, lotuses are very popular. Besides the flower, lotus flower is very beautiful and very fragrant. But poetically, it's for different cultures, it has a different symbolism. But certainly for bhakti culture, it reminds one of Krishna. For the reason, just like this verse, there's 4 features and more that are lotus-like on his form. Nama Pankaja Nabhaya, Prabhupada's writing. Krishna's navel is just like a lotus flower. From the navel of Krishna, there was a stem of lotus flower. Of course, it's Garbhodaksha Vishnu, but Garbhodaksha Vishnu is Krishna's expansion, and so from Krishna's navel, a lotus flower. From the lotus flower, Brahma came, and Brahma created this universe. This universe means so many planets, so many seas, mountains and cities, motor cars, and everything. Within that lotus flower, the beginning is found. So there's Lord Brahma appearing from the lotus navel of Garbhodaksha Vishnu. Nama Pankaja Maline. Here is a garland. There's so many flowers. Krishna is not so poor simply producing one lotus flower. He's finished. No. There's a garland of lotus flowers, big garland. As many lotus flowers as you want. This is God. So he is celebrated as wearing garlands of lotus flowers. And Srimati Radharani, she also makes garlands, sometimes garlands of lotus flowers and other flowers. Nama Pankaja Netraya. Krishna's eyes are compared with the petals of a lotus flower. We find this verse in Brahma Samhita. Now you know the verse? Alola Chandrakada Sadvana Malya Vangshi. He has forest flowers, but he has lotus petaled eyes. Alola Chandrakala said Vanamalya Vamshi. So there's Krishna's lotus eyes. And finally, Namaste Pankajangraye, whose feet are engraved with lotuses. This is a little drawing of some of the markings that are on Krishna's feet. If you look closely on both the left and the right foot, there's lotuses, or a lotus on each of the two. And thus his feet are sometimes likened to lotus feet. In his commentary, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, I am counted among the fortunate, for you give happiness to my eyes. This is Kunti speaking. My eyes, receiving the sight of your navel garland, eyes and feet, become pleasantly cool. So that's it, verse 22. So she's gone through those persons, the family, the parents, the Vatsalya Rasa personalities, and now the next verse is the lotus-like features of his form, and now text 23. There's Krishna's appearance in the prison house of Kamsa.
Kamsena chiram shucharpita vimochitaham cha sahatmaja vibho Swayevanathena mukurvipatanat Yatha rishikeshakalena devati Kamsena shucharpita vimochitaham cha sahatmaja vibho Yatha Rishikeshakalena devati Kamsena chiram shucharpita vimochitaham cha sahatmaja vibho Swayevanathena mukurvipatanat Yatha Rishikeshakalena devati Shucharpita vimochitaham cha sahatmaja vibho
Scholar, but I know that even the sound of these verses are very sweet. Not so long ago, it was with Sridayananda Maharaj. And suddenly he got into a mood of appreciating the poetry of Brahma Samhita, saying over and over again. He's recited a few verses and then said, how sweet, how nicely composed, and then said the next one, and said the next one. So persons who like Sanskrit, I mean, it's certainly different than persons who like lyrics of modern songs, but liking music is part of culture, and there's transcendental music, and this is transcendental poetry. It's very sweet. Translation. O Rishikesha, Master of the senses and Lord of lords, you have released your mother Devaki, who was long imprisoned and distressed by the envious King Kamsa and me and my children from a series of constant dangers. Now, how long was Devaki in prison? Who can say? She was in prison until Krishna came back, killed Kamsa, and then released Vasudeva and Devaki from prison. It was almost 12 years in prison. Because according to our acharyas, Krishna was 10 years, 8 months, at least by, solar calendar, when he returned and finished Kamsa. And he was within the womb of Devaki for some period of time. So that means she was in prison, and she was in prison even before Krishna was born because he was the 8th child. So over 12 years in jail, his mother, and released his mother from the prison of Kamsa. And similarly, as in the painting, there's Devaki, and her husband is Vasudeva, and Vasudeva and Kunti were brother and sister. So, in addition to releasing Devaki, Krishna, released her and her children, the Pandavas, from a series of constant dangers. So she was attributing Krishna to being the one who took care of this a series of constant dangers, Prabhupada describes. When Duryodhana tried to feed Bhima poison cake, when Duryodhana tried to burn the Pandavas alive in a palace made of black, when the brothers had to face man-eating Rakshasas like Hidimba, when they were cheated by the Kauravas in gambling, and on numerous other occasions. So would you like to hear me describe, or do you already know these pastimes of the poison cake? You don't know? Okay. Okay, here we go. This is Mahabharata. So, the history was the eldest son was Dhritarashtra, their brothers, Dhritarashtra, Pandu, and Vidura. And the eldest son was Dhritarashtra, who was born blind, so although the eldest son was disqualified from becoming king, the next son became the king, that was Pandu, and then Vidura was the younger brother of the three. So Dhritarashtra, Pandu, and Vidura. Pandu, although he was the king, he liked very much living in the country. So he went to the country, and 3 sons were born. The eldest of the 3 sons, Yudhishthira. Now, Dhritarashtra had the hope that although Pandu was the king, if he, who was blind and thus ineligible, had the firstborn son, then his son would become the next in line. But his eldest son wasn't born first. Yudhishthira was born first. The story goes, Mahabharata narration says, when the wife of the blind king Dhritarashtra heard that her child wasn't born first, she slammed her abdomen, and instead of a child coming out, there were 100 pieces of flesh. So she was freaked, and it was told each of these pieces of flesh will grow into be children, and so there was 100 brothers. The eldest of those 100 brothers was the wicked Duryodhana, who's mentioned here in this passage. So Duryodhana was the competitor. He wasn't blind like his father, he was very malicious. And when Pandu's next 2 children were born, that's Nakula and Sahadev, he died. There's some story of how it happened that he died. And so that left the mother, Kunti, there's details I'm leaving out, Kunti now had 5 strapping young boys, and they're off in the forest. So the advice of sages was they should go back and take shelter of the palace. So she did. And when they came back to take shelter of the palace, Duryodhana was really envious. And he was particularly envious with Bhima, because boys are boys. Boys would sometimes tussle. Boys would sometimes have competition. And Bhima was so powerful. In a playful way, he'd pick up one boy and throw him in the air. And he was so unlimitedly powerful. So, envious Duryodhana decided, I want to kill him. So he made a plan. And the plan was they'd play, and they'd have lunch after they played. And in the lunch for Bhima, who had a voracious appetite, he put poison in the cake to kill Bhima. And when Bhima ate so much cake, he was really fatigued. So he said, let me just rest a little bit, and I'll come back later. So because they were off by a river. And when he was asleep, alone, by the side of the river, Duryodhana had him tied up and pushed into the river. So he would drown, along with being poisoned. And Bhima's body sank down and down and down and down, and his body sank down and down and down. The Nagas at the bottom of that river, they bit him, and it was the exact antidote for the poison. So the poison was nullified. And Bhima, when he woke up, he broke the bonds of the ropes, and he was told by the king of the, like details, very interesting plot. He was told what had happened to him. And it was the plan of Duryodhana to kill him. So when he went back to the royal palace and told his elder brother, because his elder brother said, don't do anything now. We've been away from the royal palace for so many years, and they built their little, group of people, their followers. And if you try to make a scene now, it won't be good. So just keep on the lookout, watch your backside, because something else might happen. And sure enough, something else happened. The next plan Duryodhana had to kill not just Bhima, but all the Pandavas, was to send them off to a place where there's a summer home, and there's a big festival during a certain season, and they could take part in a certain festival during that season. And that special house that was built with flammable materials soaked in shellac, which is highly flammable. So it's called the House of Black. You see? A palace made of black. It was a nice big home, summer home, made of highly flammable material. The plan was that on that night, the big festival, everyone would be up, and then in the middle of their sleep, someone with the pyromaniac would come and burn the house down. They would all be killed. That was Duryodhana's plan. Fortunately, the third of the 3 brothers, who were the 3 brothers? Duryodhana, Pandu, who's now deceased, and the third was Vidura. Vidura, being part of the scene of the royal family, he heard the rumor or the plan. So, in puzzling words, he, just as the Pandavas were heading off to go to this house of black, or the summer place, Vidura came forward, disguised, and spoke some riddle that no one except Yudhishthira could understand. The riddle was to tell him, there's a plan to take your life by fire, but you'll be saved by a tunnel. And Kunti couldn't understand. What did he say? What did Uncle Vidura say? Tell you later. And she told him. And so within days, a very expert person who knew how to dig tunnels came to visit them, sent by Vidura. So he built a tunnel from the middle of the house, down underground, running perpendicular beneath the ground, the tunnel beneath the ground, to the river. And sure enough, on that particular night, the house was lit on fire. But they knew when it was going to happen in advance because Vidura tipped them off. And so they went into the tunnel, went through the house, out the tunnel, and out the other side to the riverside. And look who was at the riverside waiting for them was Vidura with a boat to take them across the river. So Vidura is the one that rescued them, but omniscient Krishna knew the whole plan and gave the ability and intelligence to Vidura to rescue them. So that's the House of Black. When they got to the other side, it was night, and Bhima, being very powerful, he put everybody on his shoulders and was walking through the forest. And as Bhima was walking through the forest, there was this giant Rakshasa named Hidimba. So Hidimba wanted to attack, and Bhima finished him because he was more powerful than Hidimba. And so that's the reference to this being the face, man-eating Rakshasas like Hidimba. Hidimba had a sister. His sister's name was Hidimbi. And Hidimbi, being a Rakshasi, she also had female hormones, and she became attracted and wanted to marry Bhima. And Bhima said no. And Kunti said, you can't say no. You're a Kshatriya. So you can marry her. So they got married. And a child was born, and the child that was born of them became a very important person, hero, in the Kurukshetra battle, the son of Bhima. Then you know the last one, when they were cheated by the Kauravas in gambling. You know that one, right? The dice game, in exile, that you lost everything, going exile. And on numerous other occasions. So Krishna was protecting them from a series of dangers. Here's Krishna releasing Vasudeva and Devaki from prison. And here's another painting of the same. Here's Kunti Devi offering her prayers, different setting than at the chariot, but she's still offering prayers. Kunti was shown far more favor because Lord Krishna did not save the other children of Devaki, whereas he saved the children of Kunti. Now, what are the other children of Devaki? The other children of Devaki were the first 6 children of Devaki that were killed. Kamsa killed them. It had to do with some other, in their previous lives, this and that, and that was their destiny. That's what their destiny happened. But Krishna did protect them, but he protected the sons of Kunti Devi. This was done because Devaki's husband, Vasudeva, was living, whereas Kunti Devi was a widow, and there was none to help her except Krishna. The conclusion is that Krishna endows more favor to a devotee who is in greater dangers. So if that means if you want Krishna's favor, make sure there's some dangers for you. The dangers aren't nice, but Krishna's special protection is nice. There's a nice passage in Brihat Bhagavatamrita. Storytelling is nice. In Brihat Bhagavatamrita, part 1, there's a description of Narada, who is sent by other sages on the search for who is the greatest recipient of Krishna's because they're the greatest recipient of Krishna's mercy. When he gets to where the Pandavas are, they're having a Pandava conference, planning what's the next calamity to have. Because they know when there's calamity, Krishna comes. Think, we're over here on Hastinapur, ruling the earth. Krishna's over there in Dwarka, ruling in Dwarka. And Krishna's over there instead of over here. So he came when there was a calamity. Now he's gone. So what's the next? What would be a really good calamity that bring Krishna? Because they'd rather have calamity with Krishna than no calamity and no Krishna. So that's what he puts his pure devotees into such dangers, because in that condition, the helplessness, the devotee becomes more attached to the Lord. The more the attachment is there for the Lord, the more success is there for the devotee. That's Prabhupada. And here's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. He's asking a rhetorical question. What was the reason? To Kunti. I was more afflicted with suffering by my karmas. Sucharpita. I was suffering even more than Devaki. I was saved by you, my master. She had a husband, Vasudeva, and thus had the possibility of having more children. And since you were the crest jewel among all children, what need was there for her previous inferior children who were not saved? Moreover, Kunti, I was again and again saved from a host of dangers, whereas she was saved from one little danger caused by Kamsa. She had not even a trace of danger, since she was happy with repeated expectations that the Supreme Lord would be born from her womb. And after you were born, she had no danger at all. I was in all ways wretched. You were merciful to me because you are the friend of the most fallen. I was not like fortunate Devaki, who had prema for you. Now, this is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his Rasika way of commenting on the moods of elevated Vaishnavas. It's not necessarily that she's feeling all those feelings that he's attributing her to have, but it's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's way of describing her inner moods potentially. And here we are again. This is the cover of the teachings of Queen Kunti, while she's by the side of the river Ganga, praying that her mind, like the river Ganga, flows inexorably to the sea, that my mind not be deterred by any obstacle and simply go to you. And her prayers are confirming that that's her mood. So now, looking at the clock, we've gone for 45 minutes. And I think it might be a nice idea to stop and see if there's some discussion. Kunti's prayers are very beautiful, very elegant, and full of humility, full of realizations about Krishna's reciprocation, loving reciprocation with all his devotees, and particularly with her and her family members, because they're all devotees, pure devotees of Krishna. Anything? Yes? Just speak and let's see what happens. Oh, really? I didn't know.
We just read the purports and did some basic discussion. This is all new, what you're showing. But hearing again this theme that ends in verse 25, right, where she says, I would do it all again all these calamities, we can do it all again.
Yes.
Like, this sounds like high spiritual wisdom, but how can we apply this to our own lives? Should we seek danger? Is it, how do we?
What's your suggestion? I can answer your question, but what is it? What was the option?
Should we seek danger? Is it a silver lining for when we're in danger?
Are we advised to seek danger, or is it that when there is a danger, there's a silver lining? That's your question?
Yes.
Okay. We're not advised to seek danger. Danger comes on its own by nature. I mean, by nature, there's always something, and when that something passes, wait a while, then there's another something, and it's danger comes of its own accord, so we don't have to go seeking it; it'll come. Now, the nature of the Pandavas, as I mentioned, Narada went to visit them, and they're planning a calamity. So the plan for them was calamity isn't a calamity. For us, calamity or danger is calamity or danger. We don't seek it. But for them, knowing Krishna's nature, that he's very affectionate to his devotees, if there is such a thing, he's there. And persons who have very elevated consciousness know that. If I remember, Vishabhanu, you remind me so I won't forget. I just came across again and sent it to a devotee who was going through a calamity, a little statement by Saint Francis of Assisi. So it's not just Pandava specific, it's, elevated spiritualists. Elevated spiritualists see greatest joy is in the kindness that comes when misfortune comes. Because the kindness that comes when misfortune comes this is for elevated spiritualists, not for you and me. But when misfortune comes, as we just read, now twice so far, sometimes the Supreme Lord takes away everything, and so the only thing left is his shelter. Now, he doesn't do that to everyone, because not everyone's going to take shelter of him. Some will take shelter of suicide or madness or something else. But for those who are very fortunate and very spiritually elevated, there is but one other shelter. False shelters are taken, one shelter remains. And it enhances and inspires and increases that one shelter.